Let's podcast alongside Joe Giglio. I'm Joe Ovies inside the Eford Studios, downtown Raleigh. Thanks to Empire Properties.
Get me some of that brass monkey back, please.
Why?
I pour one out.
Why?
The Ravens' first preseason loss since 2015.
I know. It's impressive, man. The streak is over.
Dude, the most impressive part about it was like Washington was celebrating. Like they made Washington care about this streak.
We're going to be the ones
that
the most
make this
impressive
happen. Thing.
Going to be the ones that make this happen. Before we get into last night's Monday Night Football game and all the fun and frivolity, I have takes on SamHowell that actually have more to do with Washington than it has to do with SamHowell and how they played SamHowell last night and tie that into what we're seeing with BryceYoung and the CarolinaPanthers. But thanks to Copiers Plus, check them out online at copiers-plus.com. Print management, document, cloud solutions. It's about making your workplace way more efficient than it already is. You might be losing money without even realizing it because of mismanaged print solutions. Copiers Plus can take care of that for you. Get an assessment. Check them out online at copiers-plus.com. All right, so Monday Night Football was a big opportunity for people to see SamHowell as officially the starter. I feel like if SamHowell were an NC State player, last night would have gotten way more burn, but there's a weird kind of like, I'm not saying North Carolina fans weren't interested in what SamHowell was doing last night, but I feel like State has really glommed on to the whole QBU thing because of Phillip Rivers and Russell Wilson, Mike Glennon and the like. But with SamHowell, here's a guy here's your quarterback who's finally starting, like legitimately for a team that this area historically typically has a little relationship to. And it was kind of a subdued thing until SamHowell started cooking. And what I watched last night on Monday Night Football was very much SamHowell football. The offensive line was a little shaky. He ran around, took a couple sacks that he shouldn't have taken. Where have I seen that before? Yes, at North Carolina. He also had a few lasers, making plays, accuracy. Where have I seen that before? Yes, North Carolina. The only curiosity that I have, and I wish I could talk to SamHowell this morning, buddy. So in the ACC, in college football, when you're pinballing around to the end zone, kind of bounced off dudes. I didn't really see you bouncing off guys the way you thought you could bounce off guys last night. They hit a little bit different in the NFL. I'm wondering just how sore he is this morning. But I was impressed with what I saw with SamHowell, and it's something you and I talked about last year, that when he was drafted by Washington, there was going to be an opportunity for him given their quarterback room. He finally got that opportunity late. He's taking it over. He's your starter. And I like what I saw last night.
It didn't make sense that he fell to the 5th round last year.
Same.
After what he put up at Carolina. And a lot of it was a knock on the offense. That's what I had heard. It was the offense that he ran at Carolina. There wasn't a lot of reads. It was one play, basically. We didn't see enough out of him.
What were you watching? What were you watching if that was the idea last year?
The first time I saw SamHowell play, I actually texted Mike Archer and I said, he reminds me of Russ. Because he does. Throws a great deep ball. He's always throwing a great deep ball. Helps to have De'Ami Brown there. You saw the connection again.
You saw the connection early
on,
right? Yes.
Taking a little note there for the fantasy draft. One of those late deals. But no, I think he has the right skill set for the NFL. And I think this is a great opportunity for him. We said that last year, and even more so now, because this is his team and this is his chance. And I think you'll see him take the most of that opportunity. And that started last night in a game that, quite frankly, people cared about. And quite frankly, the people on the field care about, which is remarkable when you think about the context of the preseason, because we've had a lot of conversations about, well, what does the preseason matter? Right? And the Ravens, if you don't know, they had won 24 straight preseason games, obviously an NFL record. Like, people didn't even know it was a thing until last year.
2 years ago, it started to pick up.
2 years ago, a little bit of steam with gamblers. And then last year, it became like this thing like, well, wait a second. They haven't lost since 2015 in the preseason. And obviously, last night, they didn't have Lamar Jackson in the game. It wasn't like they haven't been out there trying, keeping their starters. And now, Justin Tucker is known to hit like a 60-yarder in the preseason to win a game or two. But you saw the reaction last night, and you saw kind of the treatment from ESPN, the Monday night treatment. And obviously Joe Buck and Troy Aikman were aware of it.
This is why it was a big deal last night.
And the way that Washington players celebrated too, as they should have, as John Harbaugh said, hey, that was a tough fought game.
It was, but I think the reason why I kind of used last night as a jumping off point for Sam Howell specifically, he was named the starter last Friday. Ron Rivera named him officially the starter last Friday.
He was last offseason.
He was. It was just a matter of time until they were actually going to do it. And you can get into the semantics of, how have they built him up? Should they have just named him the starter from the jump? What kind of faux competition do you have? All that stuff.
And he fell to the 5th round, if you don't remember, from 2022. He's a guy who went into his senior year where people were talking about him potentially.
Heisman.
Well, not only Heisman, but 1st round pick, maybe even that Baker Mayfield model of has a huge year and goes 1-1 and ends up obviously being disappointed by the 5th round placement. But you know what? He's in a good situation right now for him.
My only concern for Sam Howell is the organization he's on. All right.
He got new owners. I think Rivera is steady as you could be.
But Rivera also has come.
Now, he's not the most creative guy in the history of the world on offense. I will say that to you. Yes.
He is not. There's that. There's also the weird preseason camp so far with Eric Bieniemy.
Sure.
Because like last night, as much as the story might be about Baltimore and their streak, it might be about Sam Howell. There's also an element with Eric Bieniemy and all eyes being on him to be the play caller. As I jokingly tweeted last night, man, Andy Reid cooked up a hell of a play call sequence for Sam Howell last night on that opening drive.
He gets all those credits.
He gets credit for that, right? Andy Reid gets credit for that. Clearly, that's the way it works.
But Washington thing, Ron, but that feels like a tempest in a teapot. But that just feels like they're making a big deal out of
it's Washington.
Somebody saying, hey, yeah, Eric is a little bit of a red ass.
But Ron didn't help. That's the thing.
He did not help.
Ron didn't help. And you'd think Ron, who's been around the block a few times, would know better.
With the ultimate red ass, Ditka.
Right. He would be like,
played for
hey, man, it's whatever. And also understanding how the media in Washington works by now. I mean, it's not his first season in D.C. Ron knows how these things work out, how they'll turn everything into a big deal. So he just added fuel to the fire with Eric Bieniemy. In a way, it's probably good for Sam Howell that he can still kind of operate under the radar because the focus is going to be on Eric Bieniemy and the focus is going to be on Josh Harris, the new owner. But I do feel like last night was justification for the way Sam Howell put in the work last year. Finally got that opportunity, has taken the most advantage of the opportunity. But again, when I bring up the fact that things seem to be more distractions in DC than anything else, you know what the story ended up being last night? Or at least on social media. It wasn't necessarily about Sam Howell, is whether or not Josh Harris, the new owner of the Washington football team, and Joe Buck had an awkward exchange and whose fault it was. Did you see the handshake?
I did.
I pulled it up on CJ0 has a GIF version of it. And here's the thing. Here's all I'm going to say. As somebody who's awkward with handshakes and daps and everything else, if you try to dap me up, it's going to be the most awkward thing you've ever seen. Sometimes post-pandemic, I don't know. Are we still doing fist bumps? We shaking hands? I'm still confused. Oh, you want a hug? Ooh, I don't know about that. I'm hugging you, but I'm still hitting you. I might do that. Joe Buck talked with his hands. Joe Buck extended his hand almost like he was going to shake Josh Harris's hand. Josh might have got into that brass monkey yesterday. He might have been hitting that brass monkey stash like we did yesterday. And I don't blame. It's back here, by the way.
Right?
It's all gone. I drank it
safely gone.
I drank it all. I feel like Josh, I've been watching this breakdown a couple times. I don't feel it's Josh's fault. It was Joe Buck who was being awkward. He had the hand out. Josh sees hand extended. Okay, fine. I'll shake your hand. You want to shake hands? Cool. Let's shake hands. Right?
I think Josh was just excited.
Yeah, maybe.
To be perfectly honest with you.
He probably was.
Monday Night Football, owns a team now. Feels good.
One other note, and we'll tie this into the Carolina Panthers. I commend the way the Washington football team had a full half for Sam Howell. If he's going to be the guy, get him ready for the first game of the season. And they basically played that game like it was a regular season game. They were not playing around. They were not messing around. They weren't being intentionally vanilla. They weren't doing any of that stuff. They got one more preseason game for BryceYoung and the Carolina Panthers. So how is Frank Reich going to handle this? He had press availability earlier in the week. I pulled it up on the Panthers YouTube channel. Here's what he had to say.
Yes, I feel he'll be ready. He's very accomplished mentally, maturity-wise. It's always that healthy tension between, getting him enough reps, getting our guys enough reps, and exposing them to undue risk of injury. And And honestly, especially last week with, when you go up against that defensive scheme we went up against last week where it's a blitz fest or it can be a blitz fest, it's like, is it really, how much of it is worth it? It was great to prepare for it, to have to go through the mental exercise of, hey, we got to get ready for all these blitzes. But then, you just wait. It's risk reward on how much do you play.
So that's Frank Reich on how much they've played BryceYoung to this point in the season. They got one more preseason game. Maybe I caught religion last night, Joe. I like the way that Washington handled Sam Howell. It made me wonder, why aren't they doing more of this with BryceYoung to get him ready for week 1 and what could be a year in which they can win the division? We know how weak the division is. It's a not for long league, to go full on cliche. It makes me wonder what we're going to see in the last preseason game.
To be clear, there's not one way to do this.
It's tomato, okay. Half empty, half full.
Because we saw this with McVay, his first year with the Rams. They didn't do anything in the preseason.
Right.
They went to the Super Bowl. Okay, so I get it.
The Ravens, by the way, the streak. How many Super Bowls did they win during that streak?
So we'll get to some of those numbers, but just want to give a quick shout out to Isaac Nance on Twitter, who after watching yesterday's episode gave me this meme about the Detroit Lions from 2008 when they went 4-0 in the preseason, and then of course did not win football game.
Of course.
Fair. That's a great point, Isaac.
These things, yes.
So there are different ways to go about this, and I think it's important to note again from last night with Baltimore, Lamar Jackson didn't play at all, so it's not like. What Baltimore does is they prepare everybody on the roster to be in a competitive situation. And yes, they use their kicker at times, their Hall of Fame kicker at times to win some games. But for the most part, they're just trying to be competitive and be prepared for the season. So Baltimore's record, they've won 24 straight. They had won 24 straight preseason games. It goes back to the 2016 preseason. Baltimore's record in September, while you are correct, they haven't been to the Super Bowl. They have made the playoffs 4 times since 2016. And since in those years in September, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, those 7 years in September, they're 16-7. That sets you up in a good position to make the playoffs, which they've done 4 of those 7 years, right? Yeah. So the Panthers, conversely, in those 7 years, have gone 12-10 in September. So that's not putting you in a great position to put yourself to make the playoffs. And since 2016, the Panthers have made the playoffs once in those 7 seasons. So that's what I'm talking about. I just want to see you in a competitive situation. There's not one way to do it, right? I get it. I appreciate Isaac. I appreciate your take too. Like it is the preseason, but you want to see the compete level such that you are prepared. And what you saw last night with Sam Howell was, hey, we have a quarterback who could use some of these reps. Because there is a difference between practice and there is a difference between, even a game at the end of the year last year where they weren't in the playoff hunt. So you want to get those reps. You want to look at a guy. And to your point about vanilla or holding something back, I don't believe coaches do that anyway.
Yeah.
Unless it's a super secret like McVay situation or McDaniel last year in Miami where you're like, I've never seen this guy call plays before.
But we know what Frank Reich does.
Yeah, I mean, Frank Reich is a 62-year-old grown-ass man. We have his book. We know what's going on with him. Okay?
Housekeeping. Another day, another shirt. I got the Positive Vibes Only shirt today.
Shout out to our youth listener at the Publix yesterday wearing the hoodie.
Oh, really?
Stop. No, I was wearing the hoodie.
Yeah, you were wearing the hoodie yesterday, yeah.
And I totally, I spaced out. I'm like, well, this is our merch. Well, wait a second.
What are you talking about?
Because the guy stopped me and he goes, hey, are those for sale yet? I was like, yes. Man. He's like, where do I get it? I said, Breaking Tea. Just search for Ovies and Giglio. He's like, I'm going to buy one right now.
Perfect.
Big fan of the show. I said, thank you. And then I was like, wait a second. This is legitimate. Like when we write these off on tax day, that's advertising.
It's advertising. Joe, I believe the children are our future.
I am now believing in that too. Yes.
Shout out to Oak City Sports Cards for sponsoring Ovies and Giglio. Speaking of the Utes, you might actually have some old Pokemon cards. You might think they have value. Oh, you got Fat Pikachu? Cool. Is it worth anything? Only one way to find out. Get it graded at Oak City Sports Cards. Again, it's beyond just sports cards, too. It's all sorts of card memorabilia. Like I found out that those Looney Tunes Upper Deck sets from the late 80s, early 90s are worthless.
Anything
but
Upper
at least
Deck.
I know. But at least I know.
Now you do.
Now I know. And that's what Weston can do for you.
I'm also just excited because this is the time of the year you go get those rookie cards. You go get those packs of cards. Get those NFL rookies, get those quarterbacks, and of course, the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes is coming. It's almost here.
Let's go. Speaking of things that are on the way, we are still dealing with some rain. We are still dealing with some heat, and you can deal with it with Mosquito Authority and Pest Authority. Now, I actually have to hit up Pest Authority because I have my own pest authority, cats.
Yes.
But they got a field mouse the other day. Lila caught one. Pretty sadistic in that they put the mouse in the washer and was torturing it.
Interesting.
So I had to clean the washer. But that also made me go, I need to contact pest
probably
authority.
another mouse out there.
Yes. So that's what they can do for you. Critters, baby.
Yeah, mice, bugs, termites, you name it. And that moisture barrier, that 360 moisture barrier, I'm telling you, going into this winter, and then we're going to get all, I know it's hard to think about right now in August. We're going to get all that rain underneath my house. I'm telling you, it's made a huge difference. Mold, mildew, all those good things. I feel 1,000% better about my home and protecting the value of your home too.
We also shout out Breeze Through. Check out their various locations. We have one more tumbler. I posted a photo from Grid because we did a video thing for them for downtown last week, and a lot of people pointing out, like, man, how many tumblers does Joe need? He needs all the tumblers because he refuses.
Well, you gave
to
away
wash
one
them.
to the Taylor Swift, or does that one already accounted for?
We have one left.
Okay, so the Taylor Swift person has not. Daniel has not come in.
He's already come and pick it up.
Oh, so we have two left.
We have two left.
One is Adams, and then we have two to give away.
Okay, cool. What about Ken? Because he won.
Oh, Ken has not come in.
That's why we have one.
We
left.
have one left.
That's
good call.
Okay.
I thought we
math,
had one left.
Baby, math. All right. Do the math. Go to Breeze Through. Go check them out across the triangle. Joining us on the Heiser Automotive Group Hotline, columnist from the News and Observer, he is Luke DeCock. Luke, what's going on, man?
Good morning, fellas.
I have. So let's talk about this real quick.
Yes. The origin.
So this was your brass monkey.
Yes, it was.
I'm not gonna lie, I was buzzing yesterday. After I poured myself a cup in the 16-ounce thing, and on one of our color changing cups, and buddy, was I feeling it? All right.
I notice it's empty, as in it got finished.
It did.
I'm just happy you guys are alive.
It's mostly him. You know me at this point.
Yeah. No.
I tried it.
Look,
it didn't taste bad.
But here's the thing. You know this about me. Both of you know this about me. Once I start, I'm going to finish when it comes to things like alcoholic drinks and food and everything
Hospitality rooms. Yeah.
But yeah, of course, guys, you've seen me in a hospitality room. I'm going to close that thing out until all the Miller Lite is gone. Speaking of ACC things, I feel like this is a pretty good transition point in that Sam Howell's playing Monday Night Football last night. It's an opportunity for a majority of football fans to watch him on a national preseason game, and he looked good. And typically, at 98% of college football programs, you get that one dude, and you try to make the most out of it. And unfortunately for Carolina, in their most hyped season, Sam Howell's last season, it didn't play out that way. The momentum did not carry over from that Orange Bowl appearance. And then from there, you just kind of like, oh, well, maybe the next guy will come around. North Carolina has that, though. They go from Sam Howell to Drake Maye, and I feel like we're right back in that spot for the Tar Heels, where you've got the special talent QB who's going to play on NFL Sundays. Now you just got to make sure you made the right moves around him to make the most out of it. I guess we'll find out in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some similarities. The thing we forget about Sam Howell's team, like, look, I mean, you could see it last night. I mean, every pass he threw that was longer than every route that was longer than about 12 yards, he threw to De'Ami Brown. Like, did he miss De'Ami Brown in the fall of 2021? Yeah, I think so, a little bit.
Yeah, I think so.
Also, let's not. I mean, the two other things were the Commanders didn't run the ball particularly well, but they did protect Sam Howell, which is, he only really had the one time he had to leave the pocket. That's also something that didn't happen in the fall of 2021. I still think that team had some pretty serious chemistry issues. I thought it would come out in the draft process. It didn't. It may down the road. So I think the number one thing for Drake Maye, not that Sam Howell necessarily did a bad job of keeping everyone on the same page. I think the number one thing for Drake Maye is to be a leader who keeps everyone on the same page. And obviously they had a lot of turnover on defense. I think there's some addition by subtraction there. Mm-hmm. They obviously went out and won the offseason a couple times. That doesn't always mean you get guys who are players or who get along with everybody. I mean, we saw that during the Notre Dame game last year when they're fighting on the sideline. So I think there's a couple things that kind of play to Drake Maye's advantage that Sam Howell didn't have. And not to mention, there's some running backs there, and I don't know who's going to emerge from that room, but there's no question there's some raw talent there. They've just got to kind of, figure out who's going to be his go-to receiver this year, obviously, with the turnover there. But I think he's in a good position. I don't think the expectations are as high for this they're as high for Drake Maye as they were for Sam Howell. I don't think they're as high for this team as they were. We're not talking about this is the year that Mac puts it all together and they play for a national title. This is the year, I think last year they had a good season. They win the division. There's a lot going on there. I feel like the level of expectation is not quite. I mean,
okay. Well, here's where I'll push back.
How high those expectations were.
Here's where I'll push back on that. Drake Maye's not coming back next year, right? Last time I checked, he's not coming back.
Rhetorical question, yes.
Well, okay, it's a rhetorical question. So, if not now, when? Because you only get so many cracks at this. And Giglio, you make this point all the time, especially for programs in this area. You look back on stuff and you said, man, that was it if you didn't do it now. And I'm not saying that Mac Brown's recruiting's falling off. I'm simply pointing out that Mac Brown's not going to be coaching forever. You don't have another kind of like QB of this ilk coming down the line last time I checked, at least not back to back to back. That's really hard to do at places not called Alabama. Even Clemson runs into these issues. I just feel like this really is a window for them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying that nobody is looking at this team.
And they're not preseason top 10 the same way that team was.
This is my point. We are forgetting in this moment how high like before that Virginia Tech game, they're talking about like, is the Orange Bowl the floor for this team and CFP? Nobody's saying CFP with this team. Doesn't mean it can't do it, but the level of expectations that team faced was completely different, which means you can have a little bit of slippage and nobody's picking you apart the way they were at halftime of that Virginia Tech game. All they have to do is protect Drake Maye better than they protected Sam Howell that season, and the pieces are going to fall. There is no way in hell a Gene Chizik defense is going to be that bad 2 years in a row. It's impossible. It's just I had that conversation with Mac on your podcast in Charlotte.
Yes.
Mac,
yes.
I've never seen a Gene Chizik defense that bad. And Mac was like, well, buddy, we don't expect it to happen twice. I think there's a lot of upside here. I don't feel like there's that cliff that this team could fall off of like in 2021. And I think that puts Drake Maye in a much better position than Sam Howell ended up in, where all of a sudden he feels like he has to do everything because if they don't win every play, their season's going to be a failure. I think there's a little more wiggle room here for Drake Maye, which is fine. He's a different kid than Sam Howell. He's got a different personality. Obviously, his teammates love him. He's a gamer. I mean, we talked about his first conversation with Chip Lindsey was, hey, let's try not to get you killed this year. But he's a baller and he wants to do that. He wants to take those hits. I think it'd be good for him if he didn't. But I just think he's in a little bit of a different situation. I will say this for Sam Howell. I thought scouts missed on him. I think they evaluated the team and not Sam Howell.
Yeah.
I think you give him a mulligan for 2021. He was still a first-round pick, and I think he's got a really good chance. I don't know if he'll be, a great quarterback for the Commanders, but I think he'll be the kind of quarterback who can take you to the playoffs. And the other thing about it, like I don't pretend to be like a quarterback expert, but I did think to my eye, his footwork looked dramatically improved. He looked a lot more stable, a lot more composed. That was the big negative scouts looked at with him, and I think he might have dealt with it, which, look, any good NFL offensive coach was going to fix. These guys aren't dumb, but it's good to see the progress.
With Drake Maye, Luke, at what point do we start talking about him as the number one overall pick? Because we are going to get there. I just right now, we're not having that conversation. It's all Caleb Williams. I'm just trying to, are we going to have to wait till draft season for that? Or is it going to be a game where he pops and it goes, oh, wait a second. Why aren't we talking about this 6'4" guy who's really athletic as the number one overall pick instead of the 6'1" guy?
Yeah, no, it's going to happen. And it's going to happen on the same timeline that his Heisman conversation happened last season. Like, oh, hey, this kid has a really good game. We should be talking about him. Or, oh, hey, this kid has another really good game. And look, he just helicoptered over the goal line. So it was like week 4 or 5. It was kind of after they'd recovered from the Notre Dame loss. All of a sudden, everyone's talking about like, hey, this kid in North Carolina, this redshirt freshman, maybe a Heisman guy. And of course, that's when their season also fell off a cliff, sort of coincidentally. But I do think that's sort of the progression that's going to happen. He's going to have a couple good games. The national people are going to start talking about him. Dan Orlovsky is going to do a breakdown. Oh, yeah. And then some NFL guy, one of your insiders, is going to tweet, talk to several scouts who think Drake Maye could be the number one pick in the draft. And then some Bleacher Report guy is going to aggregate that. And then someone else is going to do it. And there's going to be a podcast. And it's the same, it's the same human centipede of draft stuff. But that's the timetable on which it's going to happen. Also, one bad game from Caleb Williams is like putting the Mentos in the 2-liter bottle on this one.
Yes, absolutely. And you might as well put the salty ham on the hood of a car too. Let's do all the things, all the middle school myths from back in the day. Luke DeCock, columnist, News and Observer, joining us on the Eastern Automotive Group hotline. We'll close on this. Last week, we get the lease agreement between PNC Arena, the Centennial Authority, the Carolina Hurricanes, and how that impacts all the other things that we've been waiting on, the development of the arena and everything else, the improvements. I feel like we've been talking about this for years. And there's been all sorts of stops and starts and everything else. We've talked about it from the perspective of what it means for the city. We've talked about it from the perspective of what it means for the Carolina Hurricanes. What we haven't spent a lot of time talking about is what exactly does this mean for NC State? Clearly, NC State's got to get something out of this. And for as much as there's a vocal minority of folks who want to complain about the tailgating aspect of it, which I think that myth has finally been put to rest, what is NC State ultimately getting out of this new lease agreement and the development that's taking place in that spot?
Yeah, I mean, the number one top line here is NC State's getting $300 million in arena renovations, gets a say in them, doesn't have to put a nickel in. Like, nobody's come to NC State and say, hey, you want to chip in on any of this? Now, they get money from the naming rights that's supposed to be put back into the arena. Mm-hmm. But even on that, like the locker room renovation that's supposed to start soon, it's supposed to be going on right now, I think. Even that, the Centennial Authority is paying above that limit for them. So they continue to get an unbelievable deal in this arena. I know State fans want to move back to Reynolds or build their own arena on Centennial campus. Financially, this is a terrific deal for NC State. It gets better now because now you're going to get a much better arena. You're going to get recruiting enhancements. You're going to get all of that without putting a nickel in. And the deal you cut, you get a 5-acre tailgating zone on the south end of the arena property facing Carter Finley. And half of any property that gets moved is got to be surface parking, not deck parking. So all the people who have PTSD from trying to get out of the Reynolds deck in 1992, I hope they will finally be quiet about this and let Raleigh move into the 21st century, because this is a great deal for NC State. And the other part of it is, and this is the part I never understood, none of the lots around Carter Finley were ever going to be touched. Like people are always freaking out, like they're going to build a parking deck behind the Murphy Center. And it was like, anyone builds a parking deck behind the Murphy Center, it's going to be State. When State wanted to build an indoor practice facility, they didn't mind digging up 1,000 parking spots. So it's never really slowed State down. It just, so the whole thing was kind of like a satanic panic about parking. But it's a great deal for State. They get the tailgating preserved. They get all of these renovations and a say in them without putting a nickel in. And I had this conversation with Boo Corrigan. This is all very hazy at this point. But in the later phases of development, as it moves closer to Carter Finley, I think there's going to be an opportunity for NC State to work with Dundon or whatever developer is doing that portion of the project and build a retail store, Wolfpack Club lounge, practice facility, offices. And I've told Boo this, if you guys don't have a building with condos with balconies overlooking Carter Finley to sell to the Wolfpack Club, you are doing this wrong. Like this is your play. Your play is to build a basketball/football building that is fan friendly and a revenue generator. Remember, hey, we got to add Cal and Stanford to generate revenue. Oh my God, otherwise we're not going to, get to the CFP. A revenue generator, but that's down the road. I mean, I know that, the Dale Center is still a good facility and all that, but it would be really nice for NC State to have a modern new basketball facility. You can do that vertically now, like Madison Square Garden. So I think that's potentially in the cards. But the other thing NC State gets is stability. Mm-hmm. Hurricanes are going to be there through 2044. If the Hurricanes ever left, especially sort of under these previous negotiations, NC State was going to be left holding a pretty big bag. Yeah. Because that arena does not pay for itself without the Hurricanes. And people are going to be coming to NC State with their hand out. So there's security there for NC State as well.
Is there any movement on Giglio's idea to remove that lower bowl seating and get over our, like the whole point was we have to have more seats than the Smith Center. So let's shove them all in. And I feel like, and I know people want to rip Carolina for taking seats out of Keenan to make things more comfortable, but you try sitting in the weird curvature in those aluminum bleachers with the back up on your knees. Okay. And I feel it's gotten to the point now where I actually prefer sitting in the upper section, the upper level at PNC.
Yeah, it's much
because
better.
I don't have, I'm not like confined the way even above
you're not
the speakers.
Wedged between two cup holders.
Yeah, the little cup holders and everything else.
Yeah, that's absolutely. So they have this menu is the word everyone uses of renovations to choose from the architects and consultants to spend this $300 million on. Now, some of that money is going to go backstage. They got to build a bigger loading dock. They got to add more offices on the north end of the arena, blah, blah, blah. But yes, you're going to lose seats because you're going to have bars now that face the arena instead of the concourse.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to be able to watch the game from a bar. You're going to have more club type stuff. You're going to have clubs under the stands potentially. I'll tell you, the Islanders arena inside the bowl in Brooklyn or in Belmont, still very, very similar to PNC, that experience sort of inside the arena bowl.
Mm-hmm.
You go out into those concourses, there's food courts, there's atriums. The main entrance is like an old train station with this huge roof and escalators and stuff. That's kind of what the 2023 arena experience is now. It's not just what you do in your seats, it's what you do around your seats. And then you don't have to sit in your seat. You got a club, you got a place where a lot of their concession stands are kind of like the priority lounges at PNC, except they're open to everybody. So you don't have to watch the game from your seat. You can go get something to eat, watch the game from there. And they're going to reconfigure, to your point, reconfigure that lower bowl. Code has changed on the number of aisles you need. So you can reconfigure that lower bowl. A lot of the staircases on the outer ring of the arena that connect the 1 level to the 2 level and the 3 level, the code has changed again. You can take those out, and now you're going to have that arena concourse open to the outside. A rooftop deck on the 300 level is like the most overdue thing ever, overlooking Carter Finley, that whole thing. And then obviously, you're going to have bars and restaurants around the arena, which you don't have now. So yes, the fan going experience, both inside and outside the arena, is going to change drastically. To me, the biggest change is going to be the opportunity to watch the game from places that aren't your seat.
Got it.
And right now you can sort of do that in the priority lounges. That's going to be all over every level. That's what people want now. They want collision spaces, and they want, NC State talks about this. You want to get back to what's in it for NC State. That's what young alumni want. You want to get young alumni more engaged with basketball. So it's not just a bunch of guys who have been members of the Wolfpack Club for 75 years who don't show up for the BC game. You got to give them spaces that they can interact and make it a scene. It's going to be a scene. I mean, that's the whole point of all of this, the inside, the outside. It's to make this more of an event. And I think that's going to benefit everybody.
Luke, we appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you next week.
See you guys.
All right, big thanks to Butcher's Market for sponsoring Ovies and Giglio. We had more steak and cheese social media push, baby. We got stickers and steak and cheeses. I love it, man. I love it. I love seeing it from people.
I'm telling you, at the risk of Kenneth getting mad at me, so I'll just get this part out of the way.
All right.
Wilmington actually has sandwiches now.
Okay.
Down in Wilmington, go to the Butcher's Market, get the steak and cheese. They're now available. That being said, I don't even feel like we have to do the ads anymore.
No. Why are you messing up our money?
I'm not. I'm just saying,
don't mess up the money.
I'm not. Like our
use it as an example.
Listeners and viewers have carried this thing.
Let's go.
Man. It's amazing.
Come on now.
It's amazing. I'm not giving them a cut, but that's amazing.
Here's the thing with Butcher's Market. Yes, the sandwiches are great. Some locations have fries, some don't. But remember, tailgating season's right around the corner. This past weekend, I felt like we got a little tease of fall. Like it was
moving people into campus will do that to you, man.
But also the temperature kind of like it gave you like, ooh, it's almost there.
It was crazy hot.
It ended up getting hot. I'm talking about in the morning. The mornings were actually kind of nice, right? So by all means, go check out Butcher's Market to have all of your tailgating needs, getting you ready for this upcoming season. Speaking of getting ready for football season, that's why you need to go to Home Field. Check out homefieldapparel.com. We got a bunch of new drops on the way. Bomber jackets are on the way. So, hey, Florida State, Virginia Tech fans, you want to bask in the glory of what was? Rock those bomber jackets, which are coming out, tomorrow, Wednesday, August 23rd. You can use the promo code OG23. Again, that's OG23 to get 15% off your order. They got new stuff coming out all the time, new drops coming out all the time, and they got what you need to get you ready for this upcoming football season.
Yeah, OG23, get that discount. Their stuff is so good.
It's awesome.
Like the quality of their stuff. I know some people might be like, oh man, that price. Hey, listen, the quality of those hoodies. How many hoodies do I have?
You have Tons of them.
Too many,
It's insane.
of course, but the home field, number one on my list.
Yes. All right. Matt Davis, State Farm. Check
Genius.
it out. Yes. Check it out.
OGinsurance.com. OGinsurance.com. Home, auto, life, pet, business, financial services. What am I missing here? Matt knows it all. And he has the greatest billboard I've ever seen. Do you want to talk to an actual person? Yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
No, it was, what if you want to talk to it? Yes, I do want to talk to an actual person. Give me that number back, will you? You're itchy on the trigger finger. 919-779-8277. That's 919-779-8277. Matt Davis, State Farm Financial and Insurance Services.
Steve Wiseman, News and Observer, AP Top 25 voter, is hanging out with us in studio. It's week 0, man. What the hell do you do for week 0? How do you judge week 0? You got 2 ranked games.
Yeah, Notre Dame's playing Navy. Southern Cal's playing San Jose State Saturday night, which that game's on the Pac-12 networks, which means it's not really on TV anywhere.
Steve,
so
see, that's Pac-12 network, Pac-12 schools in the ACC. You're triggering me, man. You're triggering me. I want football to start so I don't have to worry about conference realignment conversations.
and then I went there.
You went there, and then you're Notre Dame. I'm like, yeah, that's an NBC game, but what's their future going to look like?
It's going to be on Peacock eventually.
But I do feel at least the Notre Dame Navy game in Ireland actually is a game of some consequence. I mean, it's a traditional game between those two schools. Navy's not bad. So, I mean, what are you looking for in this?
Right. I want to see how Notre Dame, game control. That's what I want to see from that game. Pulling out all the stops early.
The deep cut from the college football playoff. Jeez.
It's I want to see how Sam Hartman looks with the new offense, right?
Yeah.
The new team he's playing for. That's the whole thing about that. And then Southern Cal should have no problem with San Jose State. That's more of an exhibition than the Notre Dame Navy game could actually be competitive, which is we're all ready to watch competitive football. So let's get going with it. Hell, we're at this point, we're ready to watch non-competitive football.
It's interesting. Yeah, at this point, that's why they call it week 0. I do feel that you have to be a true, there's a reason why this meme has taken over and there's a whole personality around it. Sickos. Sickos football. That's what week 0 is for, these weird special exemption games, which Notre Dame gets to go play in Ireland. And Hawaii gets it because of the easing of travel, because they got to come to the mainland all the time, and that has all sorts of logistical nightmares. So I get the concept of week 0, but at some point here with the expansion of the college football playoff, week 0 is probably going to become a true week 1, because if you're going to expand, you're going to have more games. There's going to be on-site college football playoff games at home stadiums instead of neutral sites. We're going to start before Labor Day. So it's weird NCAA rules that put us in this situation.
It is, and I think you're right. That's a very good point, that 0 is going to get promoted to 1.
Finally.
Yes.
Finally.
And then will 0 be August 15th, or maybe that's what we'll do. But they are going to have to stretch it back that way, because they don't want to go too far into that spring semester and make football a 2-semester sport. That's a big third rail with the NCAA president.
I think you start college football around the same time the pumpkin spice stuff starts showing up in the grocery stores.
And that was this week, right?
In early August. No, actually before that. Yeah. It actually happens. I think sometimes after July 4th, you start seeing the pumpkin beers hit the shelf, man.
At my local Dunkin' this week, they said, "Would you like a pumpkin spice latte?" And I said, "No, I would not right now. Eventually, I will. This is not the time.
I'm ready for football. I'm not ready for pumpkin spice." What I'm curious about is, how do you and other voters judge what you're going to see out of Michigan potentially over the next 3 weeks? He has a self-imposed, or the school, Michigan, has self-imposed a 3-game suspension for their head coach, Jim Harbaugh, over dead period recruiting violations and workouts related to what happened back in the pandemic, back in 2020, 2021. And it goes beyond just the cheeseburger thing, but I do think it's hilarious that the NCAA is on record to Nicole Auerbach saying it's not about cheeseburgers. Y'all, you look up Streisand effect. You'll learn a lot from that. But how do you judge a team that doesn't have its head coach? These are non-conference games that he's going to be missing. ECU is one of those games.
Yes.
This is a lead up for the difficult conference slate. How do you judge that?
Yeah, they're opening with the fighting ECU Giglios. Right?
Yes, the Giglio family Pirates.
That's right. I look at it in two ways. Like, these are three games, they should take care of business. This shouldn't be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So if it gets into the second half and there's squirrely things going on, okay, I'm going to give them a little side eye, like, all right, what's going on there, right? Then I remember their head coach isn't there. So it shouldn't come down to game planning. They should be able to beat these teams. All credit to ECU, but they should be able to beat them on talent alone, right? Mm-hmm. So if it gets in the game plan, then you got a problem. But then also, like, as I go forward, I always look back. How does the team establish itself? Who are they? What's their identity? Well, it's going to take a little while longer to figure out what their identity is, probably.
Makes sense.
Because they're going to be without Harbaugh. So it might impact it further into the year. I mean, let's say if they lose one of them, I wouldn't ding them as bad, right? Mm-hmm. They'll drop, of course. But I might say, all right, well, what kind of game was it? Did they have a lot of turnovers, a lot of penalties? Okay, well, you're out without your head coach. Whatever.
But it's week 0, Michigan actually plays in week 1.
Yeah.
So are you thinking about moving up or moving down, or just giving them the benefit of the doubt with that?
I would give them. If they lost, I'll move them down.
Well, no, losing is its own thing.
Yes,
losing is its own.
But
its own thing.
if they struggle, I might move them down, but I wouldn't move them down as much.
Okay,
maybe 1 or 2 spots, maybe instead of 4 or 5. Like, because when I do my first regular season poll with actual games, it's going to look dramatically different than my preseason poll.
Yeah,
someone based on what I saw on the field.
Yeah, tying it back to our first conversation when the AP preseason top 25 came out, and we'll actually close on this. Remind me again who your ACC teams were in the ranking.
Florida State at 8, Clemson at 9, Carolina at 25.
Okay. Which ACC school do you think that you don't have ranked in the top 25? Which one do you think will end the season in the top 25?
End the season, okay.
End the season in the top 25.
I think, all right, so NC State and Pitt both have a chance. All right, I'm going to mention Louisville because their schedule's so easy, but that's going to prevent them from getting into the poll because they're not going to beat anybody.
Right. It's going to
get people's attention.
It's going to need a ton of wins banked for you to finally put them in the top 25.
Like Duke last year.
Yes.
Right. Duke never got in the poll, even though they went 8-4, because they didn't beat anybody of consequence. Right. So that's the same thing with Louisville this year. So that knocks them out, I think, of this conversation. So then it's NC State and Pitt. NC State has a chance to get in faster than Pitt does.
Okay.
Because they play Notre Dame second week. And after that, they're going to be favored in every game until Clemson in late October. So if they can win all those games and play Notre Dame well, close loss maybe. If they win, obviously they're going to get in. If they play the close loss, that may get them in. If they start racking up, if they're like 6-1 going into Clemson, they're going to be ranked.
Okay.
So that's not the end of the season, I guess. That's it. But I think they have a better chance because Pittsburgh doesn't have anybody until they play Notre Dame in like October. They have Cincinnati, and you know what I'm saying? They don't have anybody that's going to get the attention.
I feel like the opposite question, who's not going to be ranked, would be a really, really bad sign for the ACC. North Carolina floating in and out of the top 25, I can see that happening. But if you're telling me either Clemson or Florida State finishes the season out of the top 25, I'm asking you, who got fired?
That's a problem. That's a problem. And that's Jim Phillips.
Jim Phillips might just go to Graham Neff and be like, buddy, we need to have a conversation. Steve Wiseman, AP Top 25 voter. All right, man, it's here. Football's being played.
Let's do it.
Just get excited about it. We'll talk to you next week.
All right.
Do you miss being an AP voter?
Yeah. All right. I like doing it.
How would you handle week 0?
Weeks. Oh man, week 0. Nobody really plays an interesting game.
That's the thing about week
0.
0. Week 0 is a weird time, man. I don't necessarily like. I get it. People are happy for it, but it's almost like sicko. If you're a football sicko, you're all about some week 0.
Yeah,
like the people who are tweeting about Saturday, I'm not leaving my couch.
I think it'll be fun to see Sam Hartman almost like a preseason game. Like, oh look, he's like in the NFL now. Like, look at him in his new uniform. But and that game to me will be interesting because I have a rule in general: you never bet against the military academies in bowl games and this feels like a bowl game to me. And that's a pretty big number. So I would take Navy in the points, but that's what would get me interested in week 0 gambling.
So big thanks to Hometown Realty. Check them out online, myhtr.com. Give me a call at 919-550-7355. Buy a house, sell a house. They got agents across the triangle. They understand the nuances of this market. It's a weird time in the real estate market right now. So you need
crazy.
like legit guidance on this. Don't try to do it yourself. Get some experts
around here.
Make it happen.
Barry Woodard's team, more than 200 agents, 6 locations. You think they know what they're talking about?
I think so.
I think so too.
I think so.
That's not how you grow your business, by not knowing what you're doing. So myhtr.com, or give Barry a call, 919-550-7355.
Also, speaking of people who know what they're doing, Whitaker and Hamer, they've got offices all over
all the G's.
North Carolina. All the G's are covered. Check them out. You know how they know what they're doing? They have the best website ever. wh.lawyer. Again, that's wh.lawyer. Small business, you've got some estate issues that you want to knock out, any sort of legal issues, attorneys and counselors at law at wh.lawyer.
Josh Whitaker, Joe Hamer, supporters of this program. We can't thank them enough. They are OGs, as you like to say.
They are OG. Speaking of OGs, Anthony over at Oakwood Pizza Box is an OG. Oakwood Pizza Box, our pizza night's coming up. It's already filled up. I'm excited about what we're going to be doing in about a month. I'm ready for it. Very excited about it. Go check them out online at oakwoodpizzabox.com. Let's get to some of those Hey Joe questions on Twitter from Daniel. Hey Joe, how come they don't make sports movies for kids anymore? In the 90s, every sport got its own kids movie. Sandlot, Little Giants, Mighty Ducks, Air Bud, with wilder and wilder plots. How are we going to forget Angels in the outfield? Angels in the outfield.
Do you know how you like to get mad at me when I bring up the fact that they moved the time of the World Series and that affected fandom for baseball?
That's one of your it's one of your worst
like
takes.
to get mad at me
it's
about
one of your
that.
Worst takes, honestly.
I think Daniel's onto something here.
We're gonna make more kids movies.
We have a dearth of kids movies, and what does this generation currently lacking? Sports fans. Can I add this to my late start time on the World Series pantheon?
Well, I feel like, honestly, I feel like this is setting up for our other Hey Joe question this is from Zach in honor of fantasy football, which Zach, by the way, congratulations,
man.
Congratulations, man. They just had their second child. Apparently, you've decided to give your second child a cursed existence by listening to us. The first sounds ever are our voices.
I also DM'd you, Zach. Hit me back and we'll take care of you.
Yeah, we're going to make some things happen.
Package.
So in honor of fantasy football drafts getting ready across the nation, what are your top five lists? I've done this in the past. I've done a Mount Rushmore of Mount Rushmore topics.
Yep.
Essentially the way that I've positioned it is, that the sports talk host that day doesn't feel like working if ... And there's a Mount Rushmore of Mount Rushmore topics. Sports movies is one of them.
Yes.
Okay. Your top sports movies of all time is a Mount Rushmore topic. There's also the Mount Rushmore list. I put Mount Rushmore on the Mount Rushmore of sports radio topics in the summer. Do you have any others?
I think the one we did about calls and NC State fan complaints.
That was a Mount, but that was a Mount Rushmore of NC State complaints. So that is in the Mount Rushmore of Mount Rushmores.
I think you're complaining. Yeah, adding your list of complaints is on the top 5 list of lists.
The other two are bucket lists. There's bucket list. There's what's the one sporting event you've never been to but you want to, and of course there's always the Father's Day show where you talk about how, and I'm not dismissing this because I'm a sports fan because of my dad and my grandfathers. So my dad dragged me to all these sporting events, and just like you were dragged to all these sporting events, and that's how you become a sports fan, by force sometimes, because you have no other options. But my point is the Father's Day special where tell me your best dad moment of sports and all this other stuff. And you get people calling in like
Tom Rinaldi.
Exactly. The piano starts to play and everything else. So that's definitely on the list. All right. I think we got time for 2 more. This one comes from Micah. This actually is in your wheelhouse. Hey Joe, since you all are now 50 after 50 shows, what topics will bring out your most boomer takes? And we just hit it.
It's your favorite.
We just hit it.
It's my favorite.
The start time stuff.
Love to argue.
You love to argue the start time stuff.
I do. Because it's true. I don't know why you don't think there's a correlation.
I'm trying to think of what my biggest boomer take is now that I think about it.
Your bootstraps. Anytime you get into those bootstraps.
Yeah, you're right. I was just about to say there's moments where I start like, well, just do
Back
it.
in my day.
You just do it. What's the problem? And lastly, trigger warning for some of you dudes out there. OG does bachelorette parties. This is from LK. The OG sticker made an appearance at a bachelorette party with a headband that had a couple of dicks. But as I said, what do you call a couple dudes talking? A podcast. So I feel like that could be our new logo.
Why doesn't
just a couple dicks talking?
Why doesn't LK have any cups?
That's what I asked, actually.
Okay.
I actually
I want to know what was going on with the pennies too. Is that a thing?
That I don't know. I haven't.
Okay.
I haven't chaperoned a bachelorette party in quite some time. I retired after the last time. My friend Anita, who I was chaperoning for the bachelorette party, threw up in the back of my car.
Your car gets.
That was the Cougar. Cougar had seen some action back in the day, man, and not in the way that you think. Oh yeah, Joe gets some action. No, that Cougar's been thrown up in multiple times. It's not what you think. It's not the Cougar you think it is. I'm not even hitting the brass monkey, and we lost control of the show.
And on that note,
we'll see you tomorrow.